Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Light It Up podcast. On today's episode, Tom sits down with Brian Groat, the CEO of Clarolux Landscape Lighting, located in Greensboro, North Carolina. Clarolux is one of the few lighting manufacturers still located in the United States, boasting their handsome line of brass and copper outdoor lighting products. I'll let Tom pick it up from here. Recording today with Brian Groat from Clarolux. Just to remind everybody that this is a neutral-based podcast. We're not here to advertise anyone or, we don't have any sponsors or anything like that. We just do this purely for educational matter. Everybody from the consumer to the contractor, people have questions. They email us. We try to answer those questions either by email or we'll get into it with, another podcast. So with that, Brian, welcome. Appreciate you taking your time today to meet with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Brian.
Well, first of all, Tom, thanks for inviting me. Happy to do this for you. I am 40 years old. I have a wife and 3 beautiful children. I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina. That's where I live today and raised my family. So I'm the owner of Clara Lux. I started the business in 2004. And so about myself, at this point, family and lighting are pretty much my life.
I'll get used to it because it doesn't change.
That's right.
Oh, boy. So you said 2004 or 2006 did you start this?
2004.
So, a person doesn't wake up and say, hey, I'm going to get into the landscape lighting industry. Mm-hmm. How did this all happen?
So it's an interesting story. I never would have imagined that I'd be in the landscape lighting industry or business. I graduated from UNC Chapel Hill in 2003 with an economics degree. It was difficult to find a job at the time. I didn't want to go and sell life insurance or work in a bank. Seemed like a lot of economics majors were doing those types of things. So after graduating, I moved back to Greensboro and I took a job working in a door shop, building doors. It was a little bit insulting because I just graduated from college with an economics degree and I went to take a job making $10 an hour. But it was a good learning experience. I stayed there for about a month, and during that time period, my roommate at the time was installing landscape lighting. He installed lighting in high school as a high school job for a franchise. And I was intrigued by what he was doing because he would go out during the day and install lights, go back to the house at night and meet with the homeowner. The homeowner was almost always thrilled with the results, and he would come home with a check. So after a few months, I joined up in that business and installed lighting as a contractor for about 7 to 8 years.
Oh, wow.
So I worked in the field installing lights. And again, that was another really good learning experience because what I realized is that a lot of the product out there was not contractor friendly. For some path lights, for example, you'd have to lay down on your back and take out 4 tiny screws, right? Screws are falling in the grass. It would take 30 minutes just to replace a light bulb. So I realized that there was an opportunity in the marketplace to develop a product that was geared towards the contractor, where the product is field serviceable and easy to work on. So there you go. That's how I got into the lighting industry. Been doing it ever since.
Wow. So
Can I ask whose fixtures you were installing for 7 years?
Well, sure you can. You just did. So at first, we were installing a few Focus products. I used several Hadco products. It was mainly Focus and Hadco.
Right.
But it was only we installed other products for just a short time period. It was in 2004. Pretty quickly, I realized that I wasn't very happy with the products that we were purchasing, and that's when I started to design and develop the Clarolux product line.
Right.
So we didn't use other products for too long. However, as an installer in the business, I serviced, who knows, 20, 30, 40 different brands of fixtures.
Sure. So where does the name Clarolux come from?
So Clarolux comes from Latin. Claro means bright, not necessarily meaning like bright light, but bright as in intelligent, clairvoyant, sophisticated, right? And lux means light. So Clarolux comes from Latin.
Smart light.
Mm-hmm. Smart light, that's right.
How about that?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but, your distribution, you sell all over the United States, but for the most part, you're in the Southeast, or should I just say on the eastern part of the United States?
Yeah, that's fair. So the most of our business is done here in the Southeast, which makes sense. That's where we're located. We do sell a lot of product to Texas and California, quite a bit up north, and some in the Midwest. So we do sell all over the country, but our main customer base is located right here in the Southeast.
Right. So the people that aren't familiar with you or Clarolux, what's the biggest takeaway that you want our listeners to know about Clarolux?
That's a good question. Clarolux is a company that manufactures high-end copper and brass luminaires for landscaping and architectural lighting. We make our products right here in Greensboro, North Carolina. They're American-made. We sell directly to the contractor. Our fixtures are UL listed, and they carry a lifetime structural warranty. And we offer them in a variety of standard and custom colors. Let me point something out. I said that Clarolux sells directly to the contractor. Clarolux does not sell to homeowners. Going through traditional distribution hasn't been our go-to-market method. We only sell to contractors. The reason for that is that we feel that a contractor should have product availability that the homeowner doesn't necessarily have access to. It helps to protect the industry and the contractor. So I'll tell you a little story. This was in 2004. I was installing lights for 2 or 3 months. I went out and I did a nighttime demo for a man. Set lights up on his house. Spent several hours there tweaking and adjusting. I thought the job was sold. I did everything except for get a check. A few weeks later, I saw him at the local supply house, and David at the counter was selling him light fixtures. I said to David, what are you doing? That's my customer. I went and spent several hours with this guy and put together the design for him, and now you're selling him the fixtures. And he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. We're not selling to him at contractor pricing." And I looked at David and I said, so what am I, your free sales rep? So that's when Clarolux was really birthed. I realized that there was a need not only for better fixtures, but a distribution method that would protect the contractor. Does that make sense?
Sure. No, I get it. I get it. There's a lot of people out there that are still trying to figure this whole thing out, between, business to business, otherwise known B2B, B2C, business to consumer or contractor or whatnot. And you try to protect as much of your distribution as possible. And,
Right.
We all know what works, and we certainly know, based on what other people have done, what doesn't work.
Sure.
So that makes perfect sense. And just a little bit about Clarolux. And you and I, when we first met, I don't know, a couple of years ago, we hit it off pretty well. And I've got to say, and this really isn't meant to be a plug for Clarolux. It's just more or less my comment on your company and the products that you produce. And I've been in the lighting business for over 30 years, and some very, very high-end manufacturers of product that we've gotten into Vegas and a lot of high-end homes and things like that, to some fairly inexpensive things that we've had to knock out for lower end hospitality and all that. And I've got to say that, when I've seen your product, and, I have some of your product, at, in our office, and all of the landscape lighting that I have in my home is all Clarolux. The stuff that you produce is really like jewelry. And, I just, it's great product. It's heavy, it's stout, and, it's well designed and all of that. You guys do an exceptional job putting this stuff together. And I really give, my hats off to you guys for being able to do this. So,
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. So you go from, making doors to installing landscape lighting, and now you're going to be a manufacturer. I mean, you didn't go to school to learn how to operate CNC equipment and powder coat equipment and learn all the physical properties for and the types of brass and whatever for machining and all this other stuff.
Right.
When did you get into that?
Okay, so we skipped a little step there. I just wanted to point out that Clarolux imported products from China from 2004 until 2012.
Okay.
It's when we first started out in the business. I really didn't know a whole lot about manufacturing, and at the time, importing seemed to be the best method for us. After importing for approximately 8 years, I realized that there were lots of struggles, lots of issues with the importation process. I was flying to China 2, 3, 4 times a year to inspect product. But typically that meant that the product was already built and in a box. So if there's an issue, if something doesn't thread right or something wasn't manufactured to spec, you really had to take all the fixtures back out of the box, disassemble it. It was a big mess. And if you didn't go through that process, then when the container arrived, you get what you get, right? So I learned some about the manufacturing process by going to China and observing the way they manufactured over there. But really, it was just a good learning experience. I was able to learn from the mistakes that the Chinese made. So this was probably 2010, I first had the idea of reshoring manufacturing and bringing the manufacturing back to the United States. So as an economics major, you're correct. I knew absolutely nothing about metals, machinability, powder coating, CNC machines, you name it, absolutely nothing. So a lot of what I learned was on YouTube, Google, speaking with traveling around the state of North Carolina, talking with other manufacturing businesses that make other products. So it took several years to learn the different steps and processes. And it's been a learning experience even to this day. Every day we learn something new when it comes to manufacturing. It's not easy. It's really not. But for us, it's the best decision we ever made because we have control over the product. We can specify the exact alloys that we want. Some alloys are more resistant to corrosion. They machine better. They might take an antiquing or powder coat better. So we have full control over the alloys, over the tolerances. We have our machinists here. My head machinist has 25 years experience in the aerospace industry. So our parts are manufactured and machined to precision specification. And then from there, everything is done in-house. So the parts are machined, then it goes to finishing, and then to assembly. So we take raw material in the door, and we ship out finished product.
Wow. Yeah. And you guys located right there. You're pretty close to RTP, correct?
Yeah, we're about an hour and 20 minutes from Raleigh-Durham, which works out well for us. That's where the UL lab is located. I work closely with UL when we develop new products to make sure that all of our products are meeting 1838 code, and we'll get the UL marking.
Right. So, and there's got to be a big advantage of your location relative to that Research Triangle Park area from, a technology standpoint. I know Cree is there. I know there's a lot of other manufacturing hubs in and around that area that supply to aerospace, to the airplane industry and all of that. And you probably have a better pool of people to pull from, when you want to go to hire and all of that. And I know that in my experience, the best machinists were these guys that were 40 years old or had 40 or 50 years experience. They're, chewing on their non-lit cigars. But these guys, it's incredible what they can do with, an old, engine lathe or something like that. And, you probably, being a manufacturer, in the United States, and, you need a special cutting tool and all that. You give one of these sales reps a call and, they'll probably be there within an hour or so with the latest and greatest of silicon carbide cutting tools or whatever. They're probably chomping at the bit to sell stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, we have very talented employees. They surprise me every day. Sometimes if you can't purchase a tool, we'll manufacture tools.
Sure.
We manufacture several, we call them one-shot tools. So instead of drilling a hole and then chamfering it and then et cetera, you can develop a tool and do all that in one shot to speed up the manufacturing process.
Right.
And also, you're correct. In North Carolina, there are lots of manufacturers, and if we need something special, we can call on reps. There's a lot of knowledge in the area, but you have to know how to use those resources.
Sure. No, that's great. So you obviously have to wear a lot of hats. Much more than a typical manufacturer importer. Who runs the manufacturing side of the business at Clarolux?
So I have a plant manager that runs the shop floor. He gets here every morning at 7 a.m., gets the machine started up. make sure that that everybody has a task to do that day. He does a great job running the shop. We have another guy in engineering, drawing 3D models, 3D printing. He's involved in new product development as well as continuous product improvement. We use an MRP software to manage material procurement, create bills of materials, manufacturing orders, and manage production flow from a software standpoint. So it's critical in manufacturing, at least in our manufacturing, that what's done on the shop floor is also done in the system. So I've got, I manage that partly, but I have an assistant also that helps me process manufacturing orders. So I have the manufacturing process. We have 3 or 4 people involved in tracking different things on a daily basis.
Is everything manufactured to order, or do you carry a small inventory as well?
That's a good question. So we carry an inventory of finished goods, and what we do is we forecast each product based on previous sales patterns, also shifting trends in the industry. So we keep product on the shelf ready to sell. However, for some products, we're almost getting to just-in-time manufacturing. Well, how about this? Just-in-time finishing and assembly. Because we manufacture all of the parts here in-house, we don't necessarily have to finish and build 100% of what we make. So we'll keep raw parts in inventory. We call that raw WIP, work in process. And so if somebody needs to order a custom color, let's say somebody wants a high gloss white path light, we can pull from the raw parts, powder coat here in-house, send it to assembly, and ship it out the door. Typically, we need about 1 week to ship custom colors.
And since you're operating with copper and brass, you can very easily maintain raw materials without them having to corrode or anything like that, oxidize like aluminum or start rusting like, steel products and all of that. You can pretty much leave them raw before finishing, correct?
Correct. And you can do that with aluminum to some extent. So 6061 aluminum is very corrosion resistant. But if you get into like an alloy, like a 2011 alloy, if you leave that open in the air, after several weeks, even inside, you'll see oxidation and corrosion on raw aluminum. So with the brass and copper really are the go-to industry metals for outdoor landscape and architectural lighting because they don't corrode. That's why we're able to offer a lifetime structural warranty.
Right. Do you guys produce anything out of aluminum?
We used to. We used to produce aluminum path lights and aluminum bullet lights. We had an aluminum wash light. We are discontinuing the aluminum product line because copper and brass are superior. We also discovered that when you manufacture in the United States, it's not just the raw material cost, okay? You've got the labor factor too. So for us to build an aluminum BL21, for example, versus a brass BL21.
What's a BL21?
A BL21, that's a compact bullet light. That's one of our best-selling fixtures.
Okay.
So if we're going to sell a brass or aluminum, our cost isn't that much higher to go with brass because, again, we have a lot of our cost is in labor. So we've made the decision to solely offer brass and copper fixtures.
Right. And you know what? That was funny because that was going to be my next question to you is, as a manufacturer, somebody who is machining products and all of that, is there much of a cost difference, or what is the cost difference between brass and aluminum? And I'm glad you said that because, in my experience in having parts quoted in, die casting and whatever, by the time you spec out a high grade of aluminum to be die cast. What's high grade? Some people call it a marine grade or whatever. But when you have as little copper in that aluminum as possible, it becomes a lot more corrosion resistant. It's a lot harder to process because they use the copper for flow and everything like that. But anyway, by the time you get those alloys, those specific alloys, and you compare it to like a die cast brass, add all the parts together for one product or another, there's not that much cost difference. I mean, from a manufacturing cost, I don't think it's $2. I really don't.
Well, it's closer than one would think. Another advantage that we have machining all of our products from brass is we start with brass bar stock, which is far superior to even cast brass products. Anytime you have a casted product, Tom, I'm sure with your experience, you've probably seen a few times the manufacturing process when they cast. I've seen in China. I saw the workers sweeping the floor into the metal cauldron, whatever you call it, throwing their cigarettes into it.
Sure.
Whatever goes in there and melts, that gets poured into the fixture.
Right.
And that can create hairline stress fractures and weaker parts. So by manufacturing, starting with solid bar stock, there's almost no chance of having faulty parts.
And the nice thing about that is with brass is 100% of that is recyclable. You can sell that back, right?
Correct. Yeah. So all the chips, all the metal that we machine off of the product is sold for scrap and recycled and turned into other goods.
Right. Okay. So that's manufacturing. Who runs the sales side of Clarolux?
Well, I'd have to say my wife, Demetra, is really the face of the company. She's great with customers. If you call, it'll most likely be her or either Jana. She's great as well, working with customers. I also have a consultant that I work closely with on lots of things, and he assists with sales and marketing. Other than that, right now we currently don't have a quote unquote sales guy. I like to describe us as fishermen that fish with spears. So we offer a very high-end product, but it's affordable. It has to be price competitive with the other goods in the marketplace, and most of which are made in China. So we're able to target customers that we think will be a good fit for us. I've never thought of myself as a salesman, but Dave, my consultant, says, Brian, you're the best sales guy that the company's got. I would disagree, but I have a lot of knowledge when it comes to our product, to technical issues that customers might run into in the field, the lighting design aspect. I've been eating, drinking, breathing lighting now for almost 2 decades. So it's funny. Sometimes my phone will ring at 6:30 in the morning, or sometimes it's midnight. But I always try to be there to answer questions for our customers. So, maybe I might wear a sales hat every now and then.
Right, right. And honestly, when you produce a high quality product and that speaks for itself, that looks good, and there's no issues, problems, or whatever, the job isn't so much in sales because the product really does sell itself.
Mm-hmm.
The big job is getting the product known, because once you get the product known by people and they know that there's not going to be any problems and there's not going to be any callbacks, or the teeth on the MR16 fixture is always going to work or anything like that, the product sells itself. It really
Mm-hmm.
does. It's just a matter of getting the name out there, getting the product known, throughout the lighting industry. And honestly, the landscape lighting industry is a tough industry,
Mm-hmm.
merely from the standpoint that people don't like change too much. They do what
Mm-hmm.
they're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
That has the fewest recalls, and it's going to cause them a lot less problems down the road. And if they try your product, they're not going to have any issues. So
Well, the other difficulty with the landscape lighting industry is this. If you compare the lighting industry to the irrigation industry, in the irrigation industry, you have 2 or 3 big players, and that's it.
right.
You don't have hundreds of manufacturers. You got Toro, Rainbird,
Hunter,
Hunter. Okay, yes. Are those the big 3, I guess?
I think so.
Okay. So with lighting, you've got hundreds
Oh, sure.
of different brands and names. And I think a lot of that is because 90+% is imported from overseas. And so it's all the same ubiquitous Chinese stuff. And a lot of it looks similar. Probably comes from the same factories, the same molds. Might be painted a different color, have a different bell or whistle on it. But Clarolux has tried to differentiate ourselves by designing and developing products that solve problems, that answer consumer needs, that look unique. We patent almost every design that we come up with. So our stuff doesn't look like everybody else's.
Right.
It's better.
Right. So, just moving on here a little bit, you guys are one of the last holdouts as far as integrated versus drop-in light sources.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you pick drop-in?
Well, for several reasons. If I'm going to be completely candid with you, then I would tell you that some other manufacturers that went straight to integrated, they had some issues. It cost them a lot of money. They had failures, and if an integrated fixture fails, you have to rip it out and replace it. Drop-in offers way more flexibility to the end user. If the color temperature or the beam angle or even the light output isn't correct, you can swap a lamp. And lamps are readily available. They're from what I've seen over the past 10 years, LED lamps went from being complete junk to really high quality lamps that will last a long, long time and save a tremendous amount of money and energy cost. But also, let's face it, eventually the LED is going to fail. Everything does. It might be 5 years, it might be 15 years down the road. But in my mind, it just doesn't make sense to rip out the whole fixture just to make the light turn back on. And especially when we take such pride in the manufacturing process and the quality of the fixture. We know our fixture is going to last a lifetime. We're pretty confident that the LED won't. So it makes sense it goes along with our brand. Clarolux fixtures are designed to be field serviceable. If a socket goes bad, if a thumb screw gets sheared, we have replacement parts, easy to repair and replace in the field, and drop-in LED goes along with that thought process. Like I said, if a fixture fails, you can swap the lamp in a few minutes, and you're on your way.
Right. Well, you know what? I couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. So,
well, but listen, Tom. Listen, I'm not trying to just toot your horn, but I talk to a lot of contractors, a lot of big contractors that do a lot of work, and I listen very closely to what they say. And Clarolux has dabbled in possibly designing or developing integrated LED fixtures. It hasn't come to fruition because every time I discuss that with our contractors, most of them say, "Dude, what are you doing? Why would you do that?" I like being able to grab the fixture, grab the lamp that I might need, and I'm done. Why complicate it? The point, technology for technology's sake really doesn't solve problems. We feel that using drop-in lamps keeps it simple, and it works, right?
right. No.
So it's and we'll continue to listen to what the consumer needs are. I'm not anti-integrated necessarily. I am against fixtures that if they fail, you have to rip them out. I think that integrated has a place in the industry where you have to have a very, very small fixture. And integrated is the only option. Or another example, how about integrated underwater lights? Typically, an underwater light, it's going to last 3, 4, 5 years. It's in water. I've yet to find a good underwater light that doesn't leak. So if Clarolux could offer an integrated underwater light, I don't know that we ever will. But an application like that would make sense.
Sure.
In my mind.
Sure. No, and we could have a whole another podcast just on that.
Right, yeah.
So landscape lighting is probably one of the most abused products out there. I mean, you got fertilizer, chemicals, you've got the people that do all the service work, cutting grass, weed whackers, edgers, dogs, all of that. What are some of your biggest challenges to combat in landscape lighting?
The biggest challenges that we have to combat, our fixtures rarely fail structurally. They're so well made and machined out of brass. If you run it over with a car, okay. I would say the biggest challenge is the environment. Like you said, fertilizers, the sun, etc. So at Clarolux, we use the highest grade Tiger Drylac, ultra durable architectural powder coat, which should last years and years and years. I've seen product that we manufactured 5-6 years ago, and it still looks brand new. Also, sometimes water intrusion can be an issue, particularly in down lights and sometimes well lights, fixtures that go in ground. Clara Lux has been working on making continuous improvements in those areas as well. We have a few developments that we're currently working on to help manage moisture. So I'd say moisture and the environment overall would be the biggest challenges for Clarolux.
Sure. So, what's the most frequently asked customer service issue?
Okay, so I told you that we only sell to contractors, right? Okay, well, I bet you we get 15 calls a day from homeowners. They always say, "Oh, look, there's Clarolux. Oh, Clarolux.com. Let's call them up," which is okay. I try to answer homeowners' questions and support as much as possible, although we can't sell them any product. The biggest problem that I see is, hey, my lights don't turn on. Sometimes it's a tripped breaker, might be a GFI, might be a photocell that's bad, might be a timer that's not programmed properly. So lighting controls, I think, that's the most phone calls come from people when their lights don't work.
And they automatically think that there's something wrong with your lights.
Exactly. Which, from time to time, maybe there is. But, I don't mind it. Sometimes I like talking to the homeowners and explaining to them, okay, first let's check your GFI, let's check your breakers in your house. Okay, let's check the breaker and the transformer. And so just like this podcast, it's an opportunity for me to educate them. And I feel like for the most part, they're appreciative. And I've actually gotten some positive reviews from homeowners because of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I get it. So it seems like one of the largest failed area in a landscape lighting system is the connection between the fixture and the main branch, let's call it.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite way to make the connection between your fixture and the main branch?
So your point's interesting. Clarolux has never experienced a failed connection. However, I've seen thousands of failed connections in the field and from other contractors. Clarolux sells, we call them grease tubes with copper crimps. They're superior in our mind because you strip the sleeve off of the lighting cable and the copper is exposed. You take a copper crimp. It looks almost like a tiny little wedding ring. You place the crimp over the copper, you crimp it, and then you stick it into a tube that's filled with the dielectric grease that protects the connection. Typically in landscape lighting, connections will fail if the installer uses wire nuts or electric tape, and they just twist the wires together. Over time, oxidation occurs, water wicks into the wire, and from time to time, connections like that can arc and catch on fire. So with low voltage lighting, the ampacity is 10 times higher than line voltage lighting. And the reason is that when you go from 120 volts down to 12 volts, divide by a factor of 10, ampacity goes up by a factor of 10. So landscape lighting cable has 10 times higher amperage running through it than line voltage. And so arcing can be a problem if you don't use proper connections. And we've had incredible luck and experience with the copper crimps and grease tubes.
Right. No, and I try to talk about that every time I talk, on the podcast with someone in landscape lighting, that how critical that is that
Mm-hmm.
the lower the voltage, the higher the amperage.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's Ohm's law. It's the law.
yeah, that's
Ohm's law, right?
Ohm's law, and
Uh-huh.
it's a matter of resistance and heat and all of that. And I have seen wire, and I think we talked to Paul on a podcast or two,
Mm-hmm.
and he said the same thing: is that he's seen wire catch on fire and
Mm-hmm.
cause the mulch to catch on fire because of a short in the line or something like that. So,
Yeah, and let me point this out too. Okay, so the transformers, all UL listed transformers are going to have circuit breakers in them. Never install a transformer that does not carry the UL rating. But that being said, if I'm a homeowner, a question I would have is, why didn't the breaker trip in the transformer while the wire got so hot that it just melted? I'm not an electrical engineer, but I believe that the answer to that question is that over time, when you have water that wicks into the copper line and it becomes brittle and flaky, there's it's hard to explain. There's so much corrosion on the line that it'll get hot and burn up, but sometimes the breaker in the transformer just doesn't trip, and it's almost always caused by faulty wiring.
yeah, well, there's other issues, and again, it gets into different electronics and electrical things as well.
Mm-hmm.
But 12-volt circuit will not trip like a 120-volt circuit. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
trying to make this as plain and simple as possible. It
Right.
takes longer for a dead short to get
Mm-hmm.
to that breaker on 12 volts
Mm-hmm.
rather than 120. You do it 120, go ahead, take 120, cross the positive and the negative together and see what happens. That
Yeah,
that
it'll trip real quick.
that breaker will trip in a millisecond. But
Mm-hmm.
the same thing is go out 50 feet, 100 feet, go out 25 feet and take
Mm-hmm.
12 gauge wire, put it together, see how long it takes. It all
Mm-hmm.
has to do with, resistance, voltage, amperage, the whole 9 yards. So I don't want to get into it, specifically, but it does happen. The longer the run, it's going to take longer. But
Mm-hmm.
you're absolutely right. Do not ever use a transformer that's not rated for the number one for the use, and that's used for landscape lighting.
Mm-hmm.
You said UL. Let me just say it should be a listed because there are other different certification agencies like Intertech, ETL,
Right.
CSA, and all of that. Everybody tests to the same standard.
So it has to make sure that it is tested to UL standard 1838, which can be done by UL laboratories themselves or ETL Simco. There's a few others I'm missing, Tom. There's a German company out there. Anyway,
Yeah.
you're right. There's several listing companies.
Right. So, it should be a listed product and all of that, and they will all have, the better transformers will have magnetic breakers, not bimetal breakers. The differences in the way that they're manufactured, and after a while, I don't even know if bimetal breakers are still allowed, but after a while, a bimetal breaker will fail 100%. The magnetic breakers are just like the circuit breakers in your house.
Mm-hmm.
They're a lot more responsive. They're a lot more safe and all of that. So anyway, that whole thing with transformers and wire gauge and all of that, it's a long talking subject.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you see as the future of landscape lighting from a product standpoint, from a light source standpoint, from a power standpoint, where do you see the landscape lighting industry going?
Let me answer that question like this. I'm going to answer the question, how do you see the future of landscape lighting and how Clarolux plays into that? Clarolux, we're continuously improving product, designing new fixtures, and sometimes it's a small change, but it can make a big difference. So from our standpoint, we see further innovations, better fixture designs. From a light source standpoint, we've already touched on this. I feel that that drop-ins are going to be here for a long time, for the foreseeable future. Integrated may or may not continue to have its place. I think it will for certain applications. From a power standpoint, over the past, let's say 10 years, we've already made huge leaps and bounds. I mean, we're getting the lumen or light output from a 5-watt lamp that would normally take 35 watts or 50 watts. So from a power standpoint, things may become slightly more efficient, but we're already way better, right?
Yeah. What about from a landscape lighting in general? You think solar is ever going to be there?
Solar is dependent on storing power. So you've got a battery or a capacitor of some sort that stores power. It's charged by the sun. When it gets dark, the lights turn on. I don't see a solar fixture ever comparing to a hardwired fixture. That being said, I think that there could be a possibility for maybe installing a solar panel that could power a landscape lighting system. But you're talking more about a solar, the whole system would be powered by a solar cell. Each fixture wouldn't have its own individual solar charger per se. But I don't know about solar. I think it'll be a while if solar ever makes a big run at it for the professional contractor landscape lighting industry. I mean, we know you see solar all over the place, but it's not there.
I mean, honestly, what do you really gain? It's cost savings of electricity?
Well, with LED, I mean, it costs you 50 cents a month to run your landscape lighting. I mean, where you can save 50 cents, I'm not sure, but the fixtures are typically really cheap. They work well to light up a 1 foot area dimly. But I'm not really sure what you gain. I don't think that it's a different animal at this point. It doesn't have the horsepower to illuminate the way that contractors are out there lighting homes and architecture.
Yeah, the two things with solar that's always been an issue is storage. How you store
Mm-hmm.
the energy, how long you can store it for, and the way you collect the energy.
Right.
And then from the research that I've done in the past, there's two different types of photovoltaic cells, and which require different amounts of sunlight and all of that, and that's always been the biggest challenge. It might work well on maybe street lights or something like that, but
I'll tell you where solar could make a run. Solar could make a run in the Caribbean, let's say, where islands have dirty power, and or maybe there's no power at all. So you have to have a solar panel. You have to have a solar cell. Solar could work in those instances, but for mainstream America and the developed world, transformers work great.
Yeah, it's not yet.
Right. Yeah.
Well, listen, hey, we've talked for about twice the amount of time as I thought we would. It's typically what happens when a couple of gearheads get together and talk about something that they both love.
Right.
So, I just appreciate the time that you've spent with us here today. My hat's off to you for everything that you've done for the lighting industry and the landscape lighting industry and everything you've done personally to grow that. My hat's off to your wife as well. I know that she works very hard at Clarolux and has to manage 3 kids and all of that. And all of us with a family-run business who both the husband and the wives work. It's tough, and usually a lot of that falls on the women. And my hat's off. Yep. My hat's off to them.
I agree. So, I appreciate you saying that, Tom.
So anyway, Brian, thanks again so much. Looking forward to getting together at either the next event or up at your place or down at my place. And thanks for being a part of this and your insight on landscape.
Well, hey, and thank you for inviting me today. I enjoyed this, and I hope that it's beneficial to the listeners, and hopefully people were able to learn something, and I was able to share a little bit of knowledge.
Great. Thanks again, Brian. Have a good day.
All right. Thanks, you too, Tom.